There are places in China shaped by extreme terrain, violent weather, and natural forces far beyond human control. Yet today, they have become famous destinations, attracting millions of visitors every year. From narrow pathways built along vertical cliffs and glass bridges suspended high above the ground, to desert highways and canyons thousands of feet deep, each location exists alongside unpredictable danger. Here, powerful winds, slippery terrain, raging waters, and sudden weather changes can turn any journey into a survival challenge within minutes. In some places, a single wrong step is enough to bring you to the edge of a deadly drop, while other routes continue to sway and shake at terrifying heights that challenge even experienced travelers. Today, we explore China's most dangerous destinations, where breathtaking beauty and extreme danger exist side by side at the very limits of human endurance. Mount Huashan Plank Walk. This plank walk looks like a thin cut across the cliff, where wooden boards only about 12 inches wide hang in the air and force people to step right beside the abyss. Below the path, at more than 6,890 feet high, is not a gentle slope, but a straight drop of about 2,297 to 3,281 feet into the valley, enough to make the body shake after one look down. This mountain was formed from a huge mass of magma rock, pushed up from deep underground around 120 to 130 million years ago. So the granite wall feels cold, hard, and almost like it has locked away the sky. The walkway itself is frighteningly simple, made only from iron supports fixed into the rock with several wooden boards laid on top, while the sharp day and night temperature changes keep testing those tiny anchor points. With no outside railing, every time two people meet on the narrow boards becomes a breathless moment where one person must press against the rock or push half the body over the empty air to pass. Mount Fanjing. Rising through a thick sea of clouds, Mount Fanjing appears like a cold stone blade, 8,438 feet high, making the summit look like the final piece of land left hanging in the sky. This rock mass is more than 1 billion years old, surviving because its inner core is too hard to be worn away, revealing the terrifying patience of geology itself. At the summit, the 328-foot stone pillar is split apart by a crack less than 7 feet wide, turning the bridge between the two rocks into a thin border between pilgrimage and the abyss. When temperatures fall below 32 degrees Fahrenheit, wind gusts rise above 62 miles per hour, and fog swallows the path. The sacred height instantly becomes a freezing trap with no escape. What stands there today is not only a sacred place above the clouds, but also a stubborn reconstruction rising from the ashes of war, surrounded by deep fractures, violent winds, and narrow passages. Qiantang River tidal bore. From an estuary 62 miles wide, squeezed down to only 2 miles, the Qiantang River tidal bore rises like a water wall forced to madness, with nowhere to go except charging straight into the river. Under enormous pressure, the tidal wall can reach 30 feet high and move at 25 miles per hour, turning the water surface into an impact force strong enough to break boats. This wall is not clear blue water, but a thick yellow-brown mass of mud carrying silt, sand, gravel, and riverbed material, making its weight far more destructive than ordinary sea waves. When the bottom water is slowed by friction, while the upper part keeps rushing forward, the whole tide keeps tripping, rising, and crushing itself into chaotic layers of waves. This is not only a phenomenon to watch from the riverbank, but a natural hydraulic machine where the funnel-shaped estuary, thick mud, rebound waves, and speed faster than human running combine into a sweep that must never be underestimated. Dushanzi Grand Canyon. On dry grey ground, Dushanzi Grand Canyon opens like a 656-foot deep cut, slowly carved for millions of years by melting snow water and boulders. This canyon is 328 to 1,312 feet wide and still keeps changing, because every heavy rain and wind gust peels more soil from both edges, making the abyss wider. The deeper you look, the clearer the destruction becomes as the grey, muddy river roars through the narrow crack, constantly cutting into the cliff base and weakening the canyon's own foundation. The deep channels turn the space into a natural wind tunnel, where dust, small stones, and swirling air threaten people and even swallow flying devices that lose control. This is not only an abyss for humans to look down into, but an ongoing process of the ground eating itself away each day, where heavy rain, wind gusts, and muddy water keep widening the plain's wound. Lojun Mountain. The stone peaks here do not look like a normal mountain, but rise like a giant forest of granite swords, where thousands of sharp pillars have split from the original rock mass and pierced straight into the sea of clouds. At about 7,274 feet high, the meeting of cold air, moisture, and deep valleys turns this place into a fog-making machine, constantly holding thick clouds around the summit all year. Tectonic fractures also tear the mountain body into ravines, more than 3,281 feet deep, with cliffs almost 90 degrees vertical, so sharp and slippery that large life can hardly hold on. Yet on this poor stone surface, ancient pines still drive their roots into hard rock to resist strong winds, while winter covers everything with hanging ice that shines like a crystal kingdom. When night falls, the golden roofs cut through the mist and seem to connect with the Milky Way. But that same metal-like splendor also turns the summit complex into a giant lightning rod during storms. Gaoyidiling. From above, this place looks like the glowing red spine of a giant dragon, twisting between cold green pools and making the scene feel both beautiful and overwhelming. Its strange shape comes from a raw Danksia landform, where wind and water have worn down the sandstone for millions of years, leaving the mountain smooth, round, and almost bare of trees. Because of that, the ridges here are narrow, like giant blades, with some parts only wide enough for one person to pass, forcing everyone to move slowly between two slippery slopes. Deep below the valleys, emerald pools sit quietly between burning red cliffs, creating such a strong color contrast that it feels like the landscape of another planet. Since this beauty always stands close to danger, thousands of steel pins have been drilled into the rock for safety, turning Gaoyidiling into a place where humans must bow before the raw power of nature. Hukou Waterfall. When a river nearly 984 feet wide is squeezed down to only about 66 to 98 feet, Hukou waterfall no longer feels like soft-flowing water, but a rocky throat compressing the full weight of the river. That violent compression forces the water into a 98-foot deep trench, creating extreme hydraulic pressure that makes the waterfall roar like a giant natural impact machine. In early spring, huge ice blocks weighing tons are dragged into the narrow gap, crashing into each other and smashing against the rock edges until the entire waterfall sounds like a battlefield tearing apart. The mist rising upward is not clean white, but thick with yellow-gray mud, sticking to skin, eyes, and the airway, showing that the beauty here always comes with a suffocating feeling. This is a place where water, ice, mud, and rock are all forced into one narrow mouth, so every roar not only creates a spectacular scene, but also keeps cutting, breaking, and reshaping the river itself. Tiger Leaping Gorge. Between two vertical mountain walls, Tiger Leaping Gorge opens like a giant crack nearly 12,795 feet deep, where the water below is squeezed so tightly that it no longer feels like a normal river. The river drops more than 656 feet through the gorge, turning yellow muddy water and broken stones into a giant saw, constantly cutting deeper into Earth's crust. At the narrowest section, only about 66 to 98 feet wide, the huge water mass is compressed between the cliffs, creating violent pressure and foaming waves that explode upward into the air. The roar of the water becomes trapped between the rock walls, forming a heavy sound wave that overwhelms human voices and shakes the chest like standing beside a machine about to explode. This is not only a deep gorge, but a natural erosion machine, where rushing water, swirling wind, heavy moisture, and vertical cliffs constantly attack everything that comes close. Shiziguan Floating Bridge. Instead of using pillars or clinging to a cliff, this floating bridge sits directly on the green lake and curves like a dragon through a deep forest canyon. To protect the natural ecosystem, the bridge is more than 1,640 feet long and is supported completely by thousands of strong plastic floating blocks instead of solid pillars. From above, cars move one after another, while the bridge gently sinks and sends beautiful ripples across the calm river surface. With a width of only about 15 feet, the path feels narrow and exciting, letting you clearly feel the soft floating motion and the cool mist rising from the water. To keep the floating system stable, vehicles must drive under 12 miles per hour and cannot stop in the middle, turning the crossing into a continuous wave-cutting journey. Panlong Ancient Road. In the thin oxygen sky, this road appears like an asphalt dragon, forced to coil along the mountainside, carrying people up to 14,006 feet high. At this height, oxygen drops by nearly 40%, making engines lose power and making travelers feel dizzy because the brain cannot get enough air. Within a very short distance, the road plunges toward a valley at about 9,843 feet, creating a height difference of more than 3,281 feet, like a giant stone waterfall falling into the abyss. During the day, the road surface can heat above 104 degrees Fahrenheit under strong ultraviolet light, but after sunset, it can freeze below 32 degrees Fahrenheit, forcing the ground to suffer between burning heat and biting cold. The bright guardrails twist through countless curves like metal dragon scales, but the same endless slope also turns long braking into a serious danger that can make a vehicle lose control on the descent. Flaming Mountains. Under the burning midday sun, flaming mountains rise like a wall of red sandstone slowly on fire, where deep grooves carved by wind and sand make the slopes look like frozen streams of flame. This rock mass began as Jurassic sandstone, then was lifted upward by faults and tectonic force, turning an ancient layer of sediment into a dry and burning geological barrier across the barren land. Because the surface often reaches 158 degrees Fahrenheit and has climbed as high as 192 degrees Fahrenheit, almost every drop of water is boiled away by the heat before it can sink deep enough to support life. With less than 1 inch of rain each year, wind carrying sand and gravel becomes the main sculpting force, constantly grinding the sandstone and widening cracks as sharp as blades. Flaming mountains are not red like fire only because of sunlight, but because they are the result of geology, drought, evaporation, and erosion working together until nature itself turns the mountain into a giant furnace. Heavenly Capital Peak. On a 119 million-year-old granite foundation, Heavenly Capital Peak rises to 5,938 feet like a cold stone pillar where nature does not open a path but forces humans to cling to cracks just to move upward. Because the cliffs lean at angles reaching 85 degrees, the journey no longer feels like normal mountain climbing, but a struggle against gravity using chains, hands, and complete focus with every step. Temperatures below 32 degrees Fahrenheit freeze the water trapped inside rock cracks. And as the ice expands, it slowly breaks apart the granite, proving that even the hardest stone is worn down night after night by weather. The most frightening section is a ridge less than 3 feet wide and 33 feet long, where deep cliffs open on both sides, and every step feels like walking on a blade suspended in the sky. This peak challenges people not only with height, but with the combined force of vertical rock, 75-mile-per-hour wind gusts, cracking ice, and stairways carved directly into the cliff, forcing humans to realize that conquering nature is sometimes only another way of facing their own limits. Zhangjiajie Grand Canyon Glass Bridge. Beneath the transparent glass of this bridge is not solid ground, but an open void about 984 feet deep, making every step feel like walking in the air above a 100-story building. The narrow canyon below squeezes wind into powerful upward gusts, so the whole suspension system must withstand winds of more than 99 miles per hour to keep the bridge from being torn by aerodynamic force. In summer, the glass surface absorbs and reflects fierce sunlight, sometimes heating above 122 degrees Fahrenheit, turning the sky path into a bright and suffocating heat chamber. When fog rises from the canyon floor, the glass becomes blurred and the bridge beams seem to disappear, making walkers look like shadows floating toward an endless empty world. The most haunting detail is that the main beams are pushed to both sides, leaving the center core completely empty and made of glass, stripping walkers of every feeling of support under their feet. Jade Dragon Snow Mountain. At the warm latitude of 27 degrees north, this mountain appears like a climate paradox, where thousand-year-old ice still clings to the slopes near the closest glacier to the equator in the northern hemisphere. Beneath that ice lies ancient limestone, proving that this mountain, rising over 18,045 feet, was once under an old ocean and still holds traces of sea life inside its rocks. Its brittle limestone structure, combined with violent air currents rising from deep valleys, turns the mountain into a dangerous fortress where falling rocks and avalanches can crush every attempt to conquer it. From base to summit, a height difference of nearly 13,123 feet compresses many climate zones into one mountain wall, then stretches into 13 blade-like peaks for almost 22 miles, like a white jade dragon, tearing through a sea of clouds. At about 14,764 feet, oxygen drops by nearly 40%. Ancient ice glows blue after being compressed for thousands of years, and the air is so clear that distant peaks seem close enough to touch while hiding countless deep abysses. This route does not feel like a road made for humans, but like a test for apes, where every step must cling to a cliff standing 80 to almost 90 degrees above the cold, empty air. The mountain is made from Cretaceous conglomerate rock, hard and tightly bonded like natural concrete, then torn by tectonic fractures into a giant grey wall with almost no gentle slope. Although the route is only about 3,281 feet high, the real fear lies directly under the feet, with a straight drop of 1,312 to 1,640 feet, often hidden by clouds, like climbers are walking on the sky. The narrow valley squeezes wind into upward gusts of 34 to 45 miles per hour along the cliff, making every weak grip feel like a gamble against the empty space below. G315 U-shaped road. Famous around the world on social media, this road appears like a pure black ribbon tearing across a deadly desert, where the asphalt can heat up to 158 degrees Fahrenheit under the burning sun. The feature that made it famous is the legendary U-shaped bend, a unique structure that turns a 9% slope into a visual illusion that looks like a 90-degree wall shooting straight into the sky. Right here, the sharp contrast between the smooth modern asphalt and the barren, weathered earth walls creates an end-of-the-world scene that feels stunning and unreal. But the deep basin of the road also creates a deadly blind spot, and it can easily hide a 66-foot truck rushing forward at high speed. Because of that, this route is not only a vital traffic lifeline, but also a perfect example of the deadly attraction of some of the most dangerous geographic locations in the world. Yongwu Road. Often compared to a real-life spirited-away world, this road creates a strange scene where water and road seem to become one, making cars look like they are gliding across the sky. This happens when the lake rises and covers the road by about 4 to 8 inches, which is still shallow enough for vehicles to pass while turning the asphalt into a giant reflecting mirror. The landscape also changes in a dramatic way, because in the dry season, it is only a grey road across grassland. But in the flood season, it becomes a huge inland water world of more than 1,158 square miles. When the road disappears under the water, the red and white guideposts on both sides become a lifeline, helping drivers stay on course and avoid slipping into the deep hole below. This rare transformation has made Yongwu Road far more than a normal traffic route, turning it into a surreal experience that feels like driving through the clouds. Kanglong Ridge. From far away, this ridge looks like the dark grey spine of a giant dragon, climbing through the clouds, making the path feel both majestic and haunting. The route has more than 530 steps carved directly into the rock, and some parts were once only about 28 inches wide before being widened to about 59 inches and fitted with iron chains in 1985. Even so, the fear is still powerful, because both sides of the ridge have almost no protection except deep, empty drops and a line of iron chains for climbers to hold. Its danger once terrified a great writer from the Tang dynasty so much that he wrote a final letter and threw it into the abyss, believing he could not survive the climb down. When clouds sweep across the path, and some sections rise steeper than 45 degrees, many visitors dare not walk upright and must crawl with both hands and feet, while some freeze in fear in the middle of the route. Wugong Mountain. Without vertical cliffs, this mountain still exhausts climbers with endless green ridges that look dreamy, but punish every step. The real challenge lies on the slope called Knife Edge Ridge, where endless hills rise one after another and drain the strength of anyone trying to conquer it. At more than 5,249 feet high, the whole mountain is covered by an alpine grassland of more than 100,000 acres, creating a rare green world high in the mountains. The trail follows a narrow ridge, with grassy slopes dropping on both sides, making the walk feel soft, like moving across waves of grass, but also unstable, like stepping on a blade. When clouds rise from the valleys and wrap around the hills, Wugong Mountain becomes more than a trekking route, turning into a test of will between gentle beauty and desperate exhaustion. Tarim Desert Highway. In a desert, known as a place where you can enter but may never return, this road appears like a black asphalt line stretching 324 miles across a giant sea of moving sand. It crosses a desert where about 85% of the land is shifting dunes, so the wind can constantly reshape the ground and threaten to bury anything built there. To keep the road from being swallowed by sand, people created a green corridor more than 248 miles long on both sides, like an ecological wall against the moving golden sea. Along the road, there are about 108 pumping stations, and many use solar power to draw salty underground water and keep the trees alive in heat above 122 degrees Fahrenheit. Because of this, Tarim Desert Highway is not only the longest desert highway crossing shifting dunes in the world, but also proof of the long battle between human will and harsh nature. Kuker Grand Canyon. Like a giant flame frozen inside the Tian Shan Mountains, this canyon was carved from 100-million-year-old sandstone, giving it a bright red and mysterious beauty. Vertical cliffs, up to 656 feet high, surround a natural tunnel more than 3 miles long, creating the feeling that stone skyscrapers are pressing around people. In sections less than 3 feet wide, the sky above becomes only a thin line of light, while the wind, screaming through the cracks, sounds like a mysterious voice from inside the mountain. Once an important point on the ancient Silk Road, this place still holds traces of camel caravans and 1,000-year-old Buddhist art caves hidden deep in the rock. When you step into the canyon, the temperature suddenly becomes cool and comfortable, and that deep silence helps people feel the lasting power of nature. Laigu Glacier. Unlike normal white snow, this glacier stands out with a deep blue color like giant gemstones, formed when ice is compressed for centuries and only reflects blue light. Sitting at more than 13,123 feet high, this huge glacier system ends in ice walls dozens of feet tall, falling into the lake like a frozen glass wave. In winter, from January to March, the lake freezes hard enough for people to walk on it and move close to the ancient ice. Inside the glacier, there are clear blue ice caves, where light passes through the walls and makes people feel as if they are entering a frozen crystal palace. In cold that can drop below -4 degrees Fahrenheit, the sapphire blue ice, white snow, and grey rocky mountains turn Laigu Glacier into a place that is both magical and harsh. Ghost City of Karamay. Not built by humans, this ruined stone city was shaped by wind, sand, and time, where frightening sounds echo between rock formations like fossil castles. Spreading across nearly 4 square miles, this land was once a huge freshwater lake about 100 million years ago, before it dried up and was carved by violent winds into strange stone pillars. When wind rushes through the narrow cracks, the air is squeezed and creates howling sounds like a tiger roaring or a child crying, making the silent landscape feel haunting. Under the sunset, sandstone rocks shaped like sphinxes, fortresses, or ancient warriors suddenly glow red, as if they are burning in the desert. Entering this land known as the Ghost City, people can clearly feel how small they are before the lasting sculpting power of nature and time. Hongyagu Glass Bridge. Hanging between two vertical red cliffs in Hebei Province, this glass bridge makes people feel as if they are stepping onto a clear path in the middle of empty air. The bridge is about 1,601 feet long and was once the longest glass bridge in the world when it opened in 2017, stretching across the canyon like a thin thread between two mountain peaks. Between the screaming wind, the transparent glass, and the swaying feeling under their feet, Hongyagu Glass Bridge becomes a mental challenge that makes many visitors too scared to keep walking. Niubeishan. At about 12,008 feet high, this mountain feels like a stage hanging in the atmosphere, where the open terrain allows a full 360-degree view without any ridge cutting across the horizon. This exposed position also makes the sea of clouds more dramatic, because when winds of 19 to 25 miles per hour push heavy cloud masses over the ridges, they pour into the valley like a giant white waterfall. Above it, a temperature inversion forms a warm air layer at around 9,843 feet, working like an invisible lid that traps fog below and leaves the summit unusually clear. The summit's surface, wider than 32,292 square feet, was not shaped into a sharp peak, but slowly worn into a flat platform in the sky, where oxygen drops by 30 to 35%, and every breath feels heavier. When night falls near 13,123 feet, the almost lightless sky opens into a glowing Milky Way, while the road, with more than 60 sharp turns beside deep cliffs, reminds people that reaching this beauty means passing through both wonder and danger. Shilinxia Glass Platform. Located in Pinggu District, Beijing, this glass platform looks like a UFO landing on a rocky mountaintop, making people feel as if they are floating in the air. The observation deck has a glass area of about 4,467 square feet, with the floor reaching about 108 feet out from the cliff and opening a direct view into a valley more than 1,312 feet below. To keep its thin and light shape while staying safe, the structure uses titanium alloy as its main support material, a very strong material often used in aircraft and spacecraft. When you look through the almost transparent glass, thousands of stone pillars and sharp cliffs below appear like a giant maze, making the feeling of standing in empty air even stronger. Between the wind hitting the titanium frame and the ancient stone landscape below, Shilinxia glass platform is not only a viewpoint, but also a mental test between modern engineering and wild nature. Hailuogou, called an icy monster below the highest mountain in Sichuan, this place is a rare temperate glacier that lets people touch the ice age at only about 9,350 feet high. Its greatest wonder is the largest icefall in Asia, more than 3,281 feet high and more than 3,609 feet wide, looking like a blue-silver tsunami frozen in mid-air. Beyond the cold, this place feels overwhelming because steaming hot springs sit right beside ancient ice, creating the feeling of bathing inside a surreal snowy world. The natural scene becomes even more mysterious, with bright red rocks like the blood of the earth, mixed with the cobalt blue of crystal caves hidden deep inside the glacier. Unlike the usual quiet image of ice, Hailuogou is a moving body of ice, where cracking sounds and small ice falls remind people of the frightening power of nature. Atule'er. Perched on a near-vertical cliff, this village feels like a breathtaking island in the clouds where daily life is a constant gamble against gravity. The settlement stands about 2,625 feet above the valley floor, so every journey in or out feels like a test of courage. Because it sits so high and is often covered in clouds, it can look like a lonely island floating in mid-air. The Yi people chose this place in the 19th century to escape war and wild animals, turning the deep valley below into a natural defense. Even on the hard cliffs, families still grow corn and green peppers, while homes made from mud, straw, and wood help them survive the cold seasons. Today, the main access is a steel ladder system with 2,556 steps and about 120 tons of steel, yet it still leaves many visitors frozen with fear before reaching the top.